These tenants had absolutely no intention of paying 1 cent of rent at all. I started thinking about squatters' rights. Straight to jail. Arrested him, straight to jail.
Everyday property investor Aidan Winter shares an investing story like nothing you've ever heard. Of buying a property without even being able to set foot inside it, as well as the crazy problems he had to solve to turn this into a profitable project.
This agent hasn't given me the right contract. It was a completely different property.
To then experiencing the eye-watering reality of squatters' rights in Australia.
I don't want to be in that vulnerable sort of position.
And finally getting access to actually clean up this drug-infested house to turn it into a profit.
That's when I took a second look at the and realised.
This is the eye-opening story of the rarely spoken about side to property investing and how the kind of problem-solving mind like Aidan Winter can create large profits from managing large risk. I'm Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast, and you're listening to my chat with Aidan Winter. Aidan Winter, how you going?
I'm well.
Mate, you've got a hell of a story. You and I were chatting on the phone the other day. You probably got about 10% into the story, and I somewhat almost rudely interrupted you and said, "Done, come on the show." I've never heard anything like this. I'm really looking forward to unpacking this for a few reasons. One, because I think there's some amazing lessons for people to learn on the profitability side, if I can speak properly. But two, some things to really stay away from to maybe protect themselves, because there's some pretty low down points to this. Mm-hmm. But you managed to turn it all around and wrap it up into a profitable project. So before we get into all of the nuts and bolts and all the details, can we actually start with finding the deal? Can you tell us a little bit about how it came to be?
Each evening and each morning I take my dog for a walk, and we walk past a real estate agent's office.
Okay.
And this real estate agency I've always viewed to be pretty slack. And what I'd like to do is go into the agency window and after hours, and I used to like to have a look at what mistakes were in the window.
What do you mean mistakes in the window?
Oh, there'd be the wrong photos of homes. There'd be one home that's got the same interior photos as another home. They've got the agent's picture, and they've got the wrong name next to the agent's picture. Spelling mistakes, outdated listings, that sort of thing. I thought it was quite amusing, and I just got into the habit of always walking past this agency, and certainly that was a reminder for myself not to deal with them as well, because I thought, well, their front windows are pretty ordinary.
Bit of a mess by the sounds of it.
I wonder what the buying and selling process is like.
Okay.
And anyway, so I walked past this agency window one day, and there was a new listing there, and it was a house that had the stipulation of you can't go onto the block of land, you can't go in the house, no inspections of this property are allowed throughout the selling process. And that immediately had my attention. And I thought, what sort of agent would sell a house like that? Why wouldn't that agent fix the problems that were involved in the issues with that house, which would allow potential buyers to go through the property? Why wouldn't he do that before selling the house?
Because you've immediately alienated a huge portion of your buyer pool.
Exactly. So it didn't eliminate me. I was instantly interested. So I went to the auction a few weeks later. A couple of days before the auction, I called the agent and I said, is this property still going to be auctioned? It hasn't sold prior, or there hasn't been something disastrous, am I wasting my time in going to the auction? And he said, no, the auction's going to happen. So I rock up to the auction, I registered a bid, and it was the first property that was being auctioned. It was an in-rams auction with half a dozen or so properties. And the auctioneer walks out, and the first thing he says is, "What, number one? There's no one here to buy it, so I'm going to pass this property straight in."
So he'd forgotten that you were there, or?
Well, I don't know. There was obviously some sort of miscommunication there, I think. And
okay, well, sounds fitting the way you're describing the agency.
So I yelled out, "I'll buy this house," and started bidding on it. And of course, because he said there's no one here to buy it, it was quite obvious bidding against myself. But I thought that was important, because I thought, just in case the owners of the property are in the room, I want to give them the thought that there is some competitive bidding, so that when I stop bidding, I'm in a better position to let them know that that's all there is. There's more than one buyer there.
Okay.
Anyway, so I bid against myself, and we ended up doing the...
How long? When did it start?
I started at 600
Yeah.
and bid it against myself to 700 and bought it.
And what year is this?
November 2022.
Okay, so it wasn't like full swing COVID.
No.
Like we were starting to sort of come out of everything and go back to a bit of normality, and the market was still pretty strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and when you say bidding against yourself, I guarantee you there's a few people listening right now going, why? Why did he bid against himself? Can you explain a little bit of the rationale and like the tone in the room?
I wanted to bid against myself because I just wanted to secure the property, and I wanted to secure the property at the auction. I didn't want the property to be passed in at all. I didn't want it to go out to the market where buyers could have perhaps jumped on the property outside auction conditions. I knew that I was the only one there to buy it, and I didn't want to leave without them either accepting what I was prepared to pay for it or actually securing it.
Just for anyone listening right now, what Aidan's referring to as far as auction conditions is typically it's 30-day settlement, cash unconditional contract, no kind of finance or anything like that, and usually 10% deposits due pretty much instantly. So if you go to open market, all of a sudden you can be competed against offers that might be more attractive, but could be subject to sale, could be subject to finance, could be subject to whatever, which again opens up more of the buyer pool. So you're looking at this going, if I get this now, I might not get it for quite as much of a bargain in this room, but in comparison to who I might be up against later.
Because I'll be competing with
Gotcha.
people with different conditions.
Okay.
So then ended up buying the house for 700, and I then get shuffled into a room to sign the contract. And I was about 3/4 of the way through the contract when I realised that I was signing the contract for the wrong house.
What?
So this
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at
this
that.
agent hasn't given me the right contract. It was a completely different property. And so I picked up on that, and then we threw that contract in the bin and got the correct contract, which was lucky.
Are you a Simpsons fan?
Yes.
I'm just picturing, like Gil. Oh, Gil needs to make a sale. That's what I'm picturing the agent being like.
The other strange thing with this auction was you walk into this auction room and the first thing they do is offer you a drink.
Okay.
But not like a water or a Coke or a lemonade. Have a vodka cruiser. Have a beer.
Right.
Well, this is bizarre. You can't have people drinking, perhaps getting inebriated in an auction setting. This is really strange. I just thought that was really quirky.
I'm no lawyer, but I'm pretty sure if you're drunk when you sign a contract, there's a bit of an argument to get out of it there. Anyway. All right, so you're signing the wrong contract. You look at it and go, wait a second, I'm not buying 123 Street, I'm buying 2779, whatever the address is. You correct them, you then start signing the right contract, presumably.
And I said, what would have happened if I didn't pick up this mistake? And this agent goes, I don't want to think about that. And God, would have been a mess. So we signed the contract, and it was all systems go to settlement.
So talk to me about the initial numbers. You got it for 7. Now, is 7 still pretty much a bargain, or you reckon, no, that's probably fair market value considering the condition it was in, or you didn't even really know the condition, so is it just fingers crossed? Like, talk me through a bit of that.
Well, I bought a house around the corner to that one.
Okay.
And I paid $865 for that.
In good nick or reno sort of style?
In unrenovated condition.
Okay.
So, and all of the houses in this area, it's a lot of ex-housing commission, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Ex-housing commission on big blocks. A lot of people are buying them, knocking them over, and building nice double-storey homes there. So I paid $865. When I bought my house, I thought that it was worth maybe 9-ish. In hindsight, it probably was only worth $865 when I bought it.
Okay.
The house around the corner that I paid $7 for, I thought was in a much nicer location than the house that I paid $865 for. So I'm thinking, the house has got to be at least $865. More than likely 9-ish. And so I thought, well, if I'm getting it for $7, that seems like a really, really good deal.
You're buying some instant equity.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so at $700, you couldn't not buy it, sort of thing, you know.
All right. And what was the plan? Plan was to renovate or knock down, or?
No, well, the worst case scenario was I can get it knocked over and sell it just as land and still perhaps make a little bit of money. So there was always that worst case scenario, which wasn't really a bad case scenario at all. And so that was always in the back of my mind, that if everything goes really, really bad, I'm still going to, even though I don't want to knock the house over, I've still got that.
You've got a solid exit plan if you need it. Okay.
That in the back of my mind. But all I really wanted to do was buy it and stick some tenants in there and see what happens in the next few years.
Now, talk to me how the plot starts to thicken. So you've got this plan of buying it, putting some tenants in there. I'm assuming fixing it up a bit before you put some tenants in, or was it like just leaving in there as is?
Well, I actually thought that I'd need to do a lot more work to the house than I actually did. The thought was fix what needs to be fixed. I'm buying it around $200,000 light. I've got $200,000 to fix it up and still be, and still be left with a house that's a good deal, sort of thing. So I just thought I couldn't really lose on it.
How did things start getting tricky?
Well, it started getting tricky a couple of days before a settlement, where I turned up at the house and I said, "Are you guys leaving in the next couple of days?" And they said, "No, we're not." And I said, "Well, why aren't you leaving?"
So was there a lease in place?
There was no lease in place at all, and I actually did a little bit of digging and found out that it was the daughter of the old owner that was living in the house.
Okay.
And the daughter's boyfriend was also living there.
Okay.
And it turns out that the reason why the house was sold is the daughter and the boyfriend were living with the mother, who was into her 80s. And the daughter and the boyfriend started getting involved in drugs and ended up with a fairly out of control drug habit, and then started apparently abusing the mother. So the mother's gone, "I'm in my 80s, I've had enough of this," and she just left the house and refused to return, which left the daughter living in the house, and also left her junkie, the daughter who was a junkie, and also her boyfriend living in the house, not paying any rents, not on a lease at all.
And how long do you reckon they'd been there for then? That was years and years?
Years and years, yeah. And I don't know how long the boyfriend had lived there, but definitely the daughter had lived there for years and years. So I approached them and she says, we've called up the RTA, we have what's called an implied lease in place. And I thought, well, that sounds a pretty strange terminology. And I said, "You don't have an implied lease, you're a squatter." And she said, "I'm not a squatter, I've got this implied lease in place." Anyway, we had a bit of back and forth, and I decided that we weren't really getting anywhere, so I got in my car and drove home. And on the drive home, I started feeling a bit sick, because I started feeling sick at the term squatter, and I started thinking about squatters' rights. And I don't know if anyone's had a look into squatters' rights, any of your listeners have had a look into squatters' rights, but they're quite frightening. And I think that it's, from memory, it was if you've lived in a house for 8 years as a squatter, that house is yours.
Open that up. What do you mean yours? Like you have ownership?
Yes, absolutely. It's 8 or 10 or 12 years. If you've lived in the house for a time, you can claim that house as you can claim ownership of that house.
Is this federal or state law?
I've no idea.
Okay.
But I did a bit of digging around on it. The laws surrounding that really started to frighten me, because I thought, well, if this tenant starts to get fancy with me, she could make a claim on the house.
Because she'd been there with her mum for 8 years?
Exactly right, yeah, absolutely.
The first thing that comes to mind, though, is if she was there with her mum for 8 years prior, she wouldn't have been squatting if she was technically living with mum? Or is there some kind of loophole there? Or it didn't matter, you were just like...
I was stressed about it,
yeah,
and
okay.
I don't have anyone that's gone through the Australian family court system loses a lot of faith in the Australian justice system.
Right.
And so I didn't have any sort of expectation of justice if she decided to claim squatters' rights and go to court over it.
So you're feeling pretty vulnerable at that stage?
Feeling pretty sick, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you speak to a few people and like, oh, no judge is going to award her the house. There's no way, no how. And I was like, yeah, people also told me that no judge would take all of my money when going through a separation as well, and that happened.
Yeah.
So I was feeling a little bit stressed about it. So I had to come up with a solution. And what I did was I got hold of a real estate agency to put them on a lease. And I thought, if she's on a lease,
then you've got
then she's not a squatter anymore.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so, no drama. So I went back to the house and I apologised to these two junkies and I said, look, can you pay some rent? And they offered to pay a nominal amount of rent. And I said, well, look, I'm a nice guy. Let's actually make that a little bit cheaper because I really just wanted them to sign this lease.
So they're giving you like $50 a week or something?
No, it was, I think it was $4.50 a week.
Oh, okay. It's still something.
Yeah, but still
okay.
well below what it should have been rented
Yep.
for. And so I rock up with a property manager and you could tell that when they were signing this lease, these tenants had absolutely no intention of paying 1 cent of rent at all. And you could tell that by the way that they didn't ask any questions about the lease at all. They just basically said, where do we sign? They signed it.
Yeah, get out.
Pretty much. And you got the thought that when I was leaving, they were looking at me going, you're so stupid, now we can stay here. And I was leaving the house going, you're so stupid, now you can't claim your squatter's rights.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so it was...
This sounds like such a horrible situation, and it's something that I can see why your gut was churning on that. Because if you've got some people living in a house that you've just purchased that can potentially like take the home from you, you're kind of doing whatever you need to do to defend that.
Well, exactly right. It's it was potentially incinerating $700,000, you know.
Yeah, Jesus. Okay.
So,
So what happened next?
well, once they've signed the lease, they of course didn't pay any of their rent, and so then I had to go through the process of getting the tenants out. Property manager decided, well, we don't really want to manage this property at all because they're not paying any rent, we're not making any money out of it. So the property manager said, we don't want anything to do with it, Aiden, you're on your own. So no problems at all.
Sounds a little bit rough, but all right.
So I thought what I might do is, what I then had to do was look at the process of legally getting these tenants evicted.
Okay.
And you've got to wait a couple of weeks and for them not to pay the rents, then you serve them some notices, you ask them to leave.
And just in case, if you are empathising with Aiden's story at the moment, you're in a similar situation, I really hope you're not, but if you are, it's different state to state, so make sure you actually look into the state-based legislation of what notice needs to be served, when it needs to be served, because that needs to be done perfectly. There's no if, buts or maybes about it. But so you serve the notice.
Once you've served the notices, you've then got to go to court. But the courts are apparently so busy that going to court takes 4 to 6 weeks to get a court date. In the meantime, of course, these guys are living there rent-free. And then I started talking to a few property managers and they're saying, well, Aidan, you know that there is a housing crisis. And I'm like, yeah. Well, all the judges know that there's a housing crisis. There's no way that the judge is just going to get rid of these tenants. They're going to extend the time 2 or 3 times. You won't get them out for 4, 5, 6 months. I resigned myself to the fact that I needed to actually wait for this court date, and I was really not confident in getting these people out at that first court date. So I start talking to an electrician friend of mine, and this electrician friend of mine is very, very religious. And he says, Aiden, have you prayed? And I said, yes, of course I prayed. And he goes, okay. And then I've got this thing where I was like, no, you said that you'd done something and you hadn't. I hadn't prayed and I said that I had. And I started feeling guilty about lying to my electrician friend.
And you're a religious man yourself?
No, not at all.
No?
Not at all. And so I went home and I thought, well, now you have to pray, Aiden.
Okay.
And so I prayed to baby Jesus and I said, please get these tenants out at the court date. And so a week later we go to the court date. And the magistrate or the judge walks in, and we would have been there for about 15 seconds. And she's gone, yep, we'll get these guys out, no problems at all. Here's the...
that must have been a QCAT record.
It was incredible. She just walked in, yep, no worries, these guys need to go. I was in and out within a couple of minutes sort of thing.
Wow.
It was incredible. And I walked out thinking, oh, God, now... maybe that was God or baby Jesus that helped in that courtroom.
Divine intervention.
Maybe I need to start going to church or something. And that sort of thought stayed with me for about 3 minutes. And I decided that no, I wouldn't be attending church that Sunday.
But you were appreciative of the help.
I was very appreciative of God's help if he did indeed help get those tenants out. And the process moved quite quickly after that. I can't remember the terminology, but they gave it was called a warrant of possession, and that gives you the ability to organise the police to go around there and get them out.
I've seen them happen.
Yeah, and so this was an interesting thing to be involved with because the police rock up. It was 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, and she's so off the charts. They told her that they're coming at this exact time. She hasn't packed anything. She's sat there with a cup of tea, eating her jam on toast, and they literally had to grab her by the arm and escort her out of the house as she was yelling and screaming.
And you were there for this?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really quite odd that somebody could be that in denial that even receiving the notification from the police 5 days before that they're coming to get her out of the house. That she's just so off the planet that she's just so in denial that she didn't take any notice of it at all.
And the boyfriend was there or wasn't there?
No, the boyfriend strangely wasn't there.
Okay.
And I think I know the reason that he wasn't there. It turns out the boyfriend had quite a few warrants out.
Right.
And so, of course, with the police arriving, he's going to get him
to be seen.
Exactly right.
Yep.
So now I'm left with this house full of furniture, including a plate of jam on toast and now a cold cup of tea. And literally everything there, clothes, personal possessions.
Was it at least somewhat minimal, or were they kind of like
no,
hoarding?
there was garbage everywhere. I shouldn't say garbage, but there was their possessions everywhere. It was a proper full house: tables, chairs, couches, TVs, the works.
But I'm assuming you're saying the word garbage because it's not exactly sellable stuff. It's
this was the thing. You walk through the house initially, and you're like, well, there's got to be something of value here.
Yeah.
Maybe I can make a few dollars back. And then after you've walked through the house 3 or 4 times, you're like, no, this is all garbage. This is just this. All of this stuff belongs in the tip. That was on a Friday. On Saturday, the phone started ringing, and it was the cops, and they've gone, we've been contacted by the tenant, and they've gone, he wants to go around and get his stuff. Would you mind going around, letting him go around to get his stuff? I said, no, that's ridiculous. He's not going to go on. I'm not allowing that junkie to go around who's messed me around so much to get his stuff. That's
just
ridiculous.
Going to try and squat.
Yeah. And so the cops have gone, no worries, we'll pass that message on. And later on in that afternoon, the cops called me back again. And they said, look, Aiden, we'd really like to get these people off our back. Could you please just let them go round and get some of their stuff? It'll only take half an hour. It's all garbage. It'll be doing you a favour to let them go around and take their stuff.
Okay.
And I said, no, that doesn't sound fair to me at all. And this cop goes to me, he goes, Aiden, it would be doing me a personal favour if you allowed them to go around and get their stuff. I said, righto. So we arranged a time, 9 o'clock on Monday. And he said, mate, make sure you're there 9 o'clock Monday. Righto.
And you're going to have the cops there with you? Or
Cops are going to be there with me. And
so what happened to the warrant for this guy's arrest?
Exactly. So the cops rock up. This stupid tenant rocks up.
Oh, I can already see where this is going now. Yeah, okay.
Straight to jail. Arrested him, straight to jail.
Oh my God.
And he must have done something pretty bad because I believe they stayed in jail for over 6 months.
Yeah, right.
But it was really, really nice seeing him handcuffed and taken away in a cop car after the way they did mess me around. It was that was very, very satisfying.
I feel like we're going to get some negativity in the comments here because I know there is a genuine housing crisis and there's a lot of people really struggling. And I know that some people will watch this and paint you as the bad guy here. But I just want to re-emphasize, no rent was paid to you. You tried to negotiate with them to get them out anyway. You had freehold of the house, so you purchased the property. And you could potentially have it taken away from you if they were to go down squatters' rights rounds. They then had to be forcibly removed, which I don't believe they're free either. You're going to QCAT, all of this costs extra money on top of the going backwards, what should have probably been more like $650 a week. You're dealing with a lot. So the fact that you're looking with a bit of glee on your face as this guy's going away, I think it's easy to paint you as the bad guy, but you're very much just trying to make this work as a deal and kept back to a positive state.
I would assume that while they were living in the house, while the mother was there, I would assume that they weren't paying any rent to the mother, perhaps.
So we're talking about people that weren't exactly nice.
Exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. And they've had it. They've had a free ride for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, I didn't have any empathy towards him at all.
And hence the personal favour from the cop saying.
Absolutely. No,
Gotcha.
it was beautiful. Once I had a close look at the house, they'd done a few things that had actually made the house very, very dangerous. And I actually think that if I hadn't have got the bounce, they might have killed themselves in that house anyway.
What do you mean?
Well, one of the things that they did was they decided that a good way to get gas to the house was to get a couple of barbecue containers and store them barbecue gas bottles and store them underneath the house, and then drill a hole through the kitchen floor and hook up their oven to the barbecue gas bottles underneath their house.
Right. The
The other thing that they did was modify the wiring to, apparently they were stealing electricity, and they had a lot of dodgy wiring going through the house as well. My electrician friend said that it was a disaster waiting to happen with electrical problems and this completely bizarre gas setup with the kitchen stove. He thinks that the house would have probably exploded eventually if it was just left like that.
Dodgy wiring and gas is not a combo for safety.
Exactly. So maybe we were doing them a favour.
So, benefit of hindsight now. What should you have done differently, knowing what you know now?
I wouldn't have done anything differently at all. I still would have bought the house. I don't think that buying a house at that sort of level is going to be a house that doesn't have its issues that you need to work through.
Okay, so you're looking at it as these were problems. They were pretty bad problems, but they were still profitable problems?
Exactly. There's nothing that... I didn't think that there was a problem that $200,000 in free equity wouldn't fix.
Good way to look at it. And we are, because I don't think you've named a suburb, but we're talking like close to the Brisbane CBD. We're not talking like 100 Ks out. We're not talking regional, anything like that,
Not at all.
are we?
No, so it's about... it's in the suburb of Chermside, which I guess would be 10 kilometres from the CBD.
Yeah, so nice area.
655 square metre flat block, next to a one street over from what's called the 7th Brigade Park, which is one of the nicest parks that I've been to. Really, really nice spot. North-south block as well. So, yeah.
And what have you ended up doing with the property as far as adding value, getting everything up to scratch now? What's the rest of the story now that they're out? Or is there something I'm skipping over?
No. The house is now rented out to some tenants that seem to be quite happy there.
Yep.
There wasn't actually that much work that needed to be done once the tenants were out of the house. The first thing that I needed to do was get rid of all of their possessions. And one of the things that I find a real rip-off these days is the cost of a skip bin. You can get a skip bin, which isn't that much bigger than a wheelie bin. They cost like $600. And I was like, well, this is going to need like 10 skip bins. That's just going to be like $6,000 just to remove their stuff. So I thought, no, I'm not doing that. And so I decided that what I'd do is borrow a friend's ute and simply take the stuff to the dump in my own time.
Okay.
And so I ended up doing so many trips to the dump that they started asking me and believing that I was using the dump for commercial purposes because I was there. I'd do 2 dump runs in the morning before work and I'd do 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
so
right.
I did that for 2 or 3 weeks sort of thing. And that was probably the hardest part was actually clearing the house out.
Are you afraid of like needles or anything like that? Or like...
Yeah. I wasn't really afraid of them, but I found quite a few needles in the house. I once found this glass bong, and I picked it up, and I was like, oh, here's a bong. And when I picked it up, I noticed that the bong was actually greasy.
Okay.
I was like, I wonder what that grease is. And that's when I took a second look at the glass bong and realised that it was actually a penis pump. And I reflected on that, and I thought, well, my parents must be pretty happy that I don't know what a bong looks like, and I also don't know what a penis pump looks like either, because I actually had
Did you
to
reverse image search it?
No. There was a tag down the bottom of this penis pump, and it was the maker of the penis pump, and so I googled that, and that's when I figured out what it was and went and washed my hands.
I'm just picturing someone like walking in at that exact moment as you're holding it. I swear it's not mine.
But yeah, there was a few interesting things like that were there. But yeah, quite a few needles, empty bags and that sort of thing.
Mate, you say you weren't scared. I'd be terrified of getting poked by something and catching something. Like you
Yeah.
all like hazmat it up, or how are you protecting yourself?
No, I was just careful as I was just trying to be as careful as I could.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And now you said that there wasn't a lot of work to do, so you weren't like replacing bathrooms, kitchens, that kind of stuff.
No, the bathroom was fine, and the kitchen actually seemed to be relatively new. And I was speaking to the neighbour that actually used to get along reasonably well with the mum. And the elderly mother actually got a second-hand kitchen from Gumtree. And it doesn't really... I would have put a different design kitchen into the house, but it was actually only a 12-year-old kitchen. But it needed a fair bit of tidying up. And
Yeah, I
so I was really lucky it was a caboodle kitchen, and I could actually go down to Bunnings, even though the kitchen was 12 years old, and get the same parts and the same panels that
Yep.
were there on the kitchen originally. And so I ended up spending a few $1,000s at Bunnings and basically got what looks like a brand new kitchen now, because all of the doors were redone, all of the panels were redone.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really good.
And bathroom, similar kind of situation.
Bathroom, I think, was maybe... the house is a 50s house. The bathroom, I think, would have been done around the 80s or the early 90s, perhaps. And
Okay. So not new,
was
but
absolutely
tidy.
fine. So it was just a matter of getting the kitchen sorted, getting the place repainted, polishing the floors, and she was done.
So first initial numbers were not like this massive back of envelope or like massive spreadsheet rather. It sounds like there wasn't even really a back of envelope. It was just, I've just bought something for in the mid eights. If I can buy this for 7, and it was probably worth more like 9-ish.
Yeah,
Happy days.
absolutely.
So it's very simple kind of math that we're talking here.
Uh-huh.
And what did we end up with as far as equity gain? What are you looking at there?
Well, I probably spent $25,000-$30,000 on it to get it once. There was a little bit of electrical work to do that I skipped over, I guess.
Does that include loss of rent? Like dealing with all that?
No,
No. So what do you reckon that would have cost you?
I'm guessing maybe $5,000 or $6,000 in loss of rent.
Okay.
So if we said...
So not a huge amount.
If we said 35,000, a house behind my house, which I think would be quite comparable, that one sold for 980. So it's worked out to be really really worthwhile doing the process.
So you're looking almost a mil now
Yeah.
in value.
Yeah.
Okay. And it surprises me, like when you say there's nothing I'd do differently. I like that because it feels like that's not coming from a place of I did everything perfectly, but it's coming from a place of it was imperfect, but that's why there was profit. And if you can solve all those problems and keep even the way that you're telling this story, you're telling this with a very calm, level head. It's not emotional up and down for you. I'm probably reacting to it more than you are, and you went through it. But having that kind of level head, that approach with this, is obviously serving you quite well because now you're $250,000 up in equity after expenses.
I see these properties all the time, and I think that one of the mistakes that people make when they're looking at buying a property is they go, well, I want to get a 4-bedroom house or that must have a double car garage, it must have 2 bathrooms, it must be facing this direction. And they put their blinkers on and they don't actually see the bargains that are in the market. One of the things that they might want to do is actually look through the house. Well, I couldn't. Are you not going to be interested in a property that you can't look through?
Talk me through a bit of the thought process to feel comfortable with that, though, because I can see how a lot of people wouldn't.
I refuse to buy a property that I've been through.
I don't know, ever.
Ever.
So
I don't want this. Buying a property shouldn't be an emotional purchase. If I go through the property and go through the house, maybe I'll start feeling emotional about it and pay a little bit more. Well, the other thing that I do is the property that I bought before this one that I paid 7 for, the other thing that I do is I won't buy a property unless I'm buying it 10% less than what it's worth.
So you're
And when you're buying a property 10% than what it's worth,
yeah.
there's really no risk. If we find some termites, we find some damage to the house, we've got 10% to sort those problems out.
So you'd have no problems buying into stateside, I'm saying then, would you?
As long as it's 10% below market value, I'm in.
Let's open that up a little bit more as well. This is slightly off topic on the story, but when you're looking 10% below, because this is a thing that used to get thrown around all the time, still does to a certain extent. People are like, oh yeah, well I only buy it if it's below market value. and then people will expect to just go on realestate.com and the first property they look at is below market value. It's like, well, no, it takes building connections with relationships off markets. There's more steps to it. But how have you found that?
I don't agree with that at all. I think that it takes expanding what you're looking for.
Okay.
And once you expand what you're looking for, and when you will consider every single house and every single property that's on the market in the suburb that you're looking in.
So you reckon it's people with too narrow a search?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So people wake up, oh, I'm looking at buying a house, but it must be X, Y, Z. It must be 4 bedrooms. It must have it must be close to the cash converters. It must be have a renovated kitchen or a renovated bathroom, or even the opposite side. I'm looking for a property to renovate. It must be a renovator that I can add value to. Well, okay. So that means you're going to discount all of the homes that are already renovated. Silly.
So you purely look for, is it a deal? That's
yes,
it.
absolutely.
Where'd this mindset come from? Is this from growing up? Is this friends? Is this?
I'm just always wanting to get a bargain, sort of thing.
Okay.
And when you get a bargain, you feel really good. If it's a property bargain, you feel good.
Yeah.
You feel really smart. You feel really proud of what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And it really boosts your confidence as well.
So were you the entrepreneurial kid at school, like buying 6 packs of Coke and selling them individually to your friends? That kind of always making a deal happen, or?
Not so much the entrepreneurial side of things, but I always want to make sure that I'm getting a good deal when I buy something. I think the whole process that most people use to buy a house is really a little bit silly. Let's go and find a house that suits all of our needs and then fall in love with that house. We'll go and search for a house for 2 months. We'll find the house that we absolutely love and adore. You're very vulnerable to paying above market for that house because you've fallen in love with that property. I don't want to be in that vulnerable sort of position. Mm-hmm. And then if the market goes back a little bit, or if you've paid 5% too much and the market slips 10%, you're down the whole 15%.
Yeah. You used to see that all the time when I was an agent. And it's exactly what you press on. You press on that emotional trigger.
And get these buyers to pay a premium price for a house that they love. And it's not the same as buying a car. You're going to pay 10% too much for a car that you've bought. You've only dusted maybe $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. You're going to pay 10% too much for a house.
We're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you pay 10% below for the house, you're almost immune from the market going backwards a little bit, aren't you?
Well, wrapping things up, if we're looking at the leasing side of things, is there anything notable to share with everyone at the moment from the leasing aspect, or was it all pretty clean cut?
It was all very clean cut, yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. Once as you're saying before, there is a bit of a housing crisis at the moment, so leasing the house out wasn't anything that I was scared of doing at all. So I think I've got a very good property manager. Sam from Exclusively Managed is very good. She's helped me a lot.
Awesome.
Getting the house leased out wasn't a big concern, and it certainly wasn't an issue at all.
For anyone that's listening to this, getting to the pointy end of things now, what's an action step that you would advise people take if they've listened to it and gone, I'm pretty inspired by Aidan's story. I think this is pretty good. What's something they could pull out the headphones right now and just put into practice to start walking down a similar path?
Find properties that are 10% below what they should be. And they're out there. They're everywhere. I reckon that if I went through realestate.com, I could point out 5 or 6 properties now that you can buy today that are 5 or 6, that are 10% below where they should be. Start looking for them and broaden your search criteria. It might be a 3-bedroom house or a 2-bedroom house rather than a 4-bedroom house. It might be a house that you can't look through. Make that search criteria as wide as possible. It might be a townhouse, not a house. People say don't buy units, don't buy townhouses. I'm going to buy a townhouse if it's 10% below market value. I'm going to buy a unit if it's 10% below market value. So
what I'm hearing is,
why not? Go
onto realestate.com and take off all the filters.
Absolutely, yeah.
I like that.
And start looking at properties that, I've bought 2-bedroom houses in the past. Mm-hmm. Apparently people don't like to buy 2-bedroom houses. I think they're brilliant. You can buy them, you can often buy them well below where they should be. And for a 2-bedroom house, you rent it usually to a couple or a single person, a little bit less transient than the family. So you usually, well, I've found that I usually get a tenant in there that's a lot more long term
Makes sense.
because there's simply less people living in the house.
Yeah, yeah.
There's deals out there. They're everywhere. There's bargains out there. All we've got to do is, I think, open up your eyes a little bit and find them.
Well, arguably, we've arrived at the most important question of the entire show. I need to ask you, Aidan Winter, what is your favourite pizza?
I like. I really like wood-fired pizza.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, anything wood-fired.
Anything
Yeah,
wood-fired?
Anything wood-fired. Yeah.
You really don't have a preference.
No.
I'll buy a unit, I'll buy a house, anything wood-fired.
Anything wood-fired.
There's
yeah.
one thing you look for, and the rest are the variables.
There's a really nice pizza restaurant close to where we live, and we'll head down for a wood-fired pizza every couple of weeks.
Give it a shout-out. I always like to give a good pizza joint a shout-out. Do you remember their name?
I couldn't even tell you what name it is.
Okay, all right. Look, Aiden, you've got a fascinating story, mate. You've really turned the whole lemons to lemonade situation. You've dealt with some pretty big obstacles in your way with a calm, cool head from what I can see about it as well. And you've walked away with a huge amount of profit. And by the sounds of things, you do the same thing all over again. And I think it's just awesome to hear this. This wasn't a horror story of never again. This was I don't want to use the word horror story, but this was I guess a very tricky story, let's say, if I'm going to be very diplomatic about this, but that led to an amazing profit because you just kept following the process.
And the process is buy at least 10% below the market, and there's no problem that you won't be able to overcome.
Aidan Winter, thank you so much for jumping on the show, mate. Really appreciate your time.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you.